They stood in the doorway and stomped the rain from their boots and swung their hats and wiped the water from their faces. "Where's All-American Cowboy at?" "He's done inside." "Well, let's go. He'll have all them good fat ones picked out for himself." The whores in their shabby deshabille looked up from the shabby sofas where they sat. The place was all but empty. John Grady, he looked like a goddamned wharf rat. The barman poured their whiskeys. "You got one of them little darlings picked out?" The boy shook his head. "Which one you like, Troy?" John Grady was studying something in the back bar glass. Troy turned and followed his gaze. A young girl of no more than 17, and perhaps younger, was sitting on the arm of the sofa with her hands cupped in her lap and her eyes cast down. "That little girl, the one you're looking at, I bet she ain't 15. She looked up and looked toward them. Her long black hair fell across her shoulder, and she swept it slowly away with the back of her hand. "Go on and get her." "It's all right." "Hell, go on." Billy looked at Troy. "You all ready?" he said. "Well, let's go get something to eat. I think it's fixing to quit raining." They walked up Ignacio Mejia to Juarez Avenue, and the lights of the bars and cafes and curio shops bled slowly in the wet black street. "Caballeros," he said. They ate steaks and drank coffee and listened to Troy's war stories and smoked. They walked up Juarez Avenue to the bridge. It was still dark when John Grady woke him. He was up and dressed and had already been to the kitchen and back and had spoken to the horses. And he stood in the doorway of Billy's bunk room with the canvas curtain pushed back against the jamb and a cup of coffee in one hand. "Hey, cowboy," he said. Billy groaned. "Let's go. You can sleep in the winter." "Damn." "Let's go. You've been laying there damn near 4 hours. Billy sat up and swung his feet onto the floor and sat with his head in his hands. "I don't see how you can lay there like that." "Damn if you ain't a cheerful son of a bitch in the morning." John Grady walked back out up the barn bay toward the house. The horses nickered at him from their stalls as he passed. "I know what time it is," he told them. They were all at the table eating when Billy pushed open the door and came in. Orrin glanced at him over the top of his paper and continued reading. An old man had come into the kitchen with his braces hanging. He had just shaved, and there was shaving cream on his neck and on the lobe of one ear. John Grady pushed back his chair. "Here, Mr. Johnson," he said. "Sit here. I'm all done." "Sit down," he said. "Sit down. I'm just getting me some coffee." He stopped at the table and spooned 2 huge scoops of sugar out of the bowl into his cup and left the room, taking the sugar spoon with him. "What's wrong with him?" said J.C. "Ain't nothing wrong with him," said Bill. "I meant John Grady." "I know who you meant." They nooned on a grassy rise on the red clay ranges 10 miles south of the ranch house. J.C. says the old man is getting crazier and crazier. "There ain't nothing wrong with him. He's just old is all. J.C. says he ain't been right since his daughter died. You don't get over a woman like that. He ain't getting over nothing. He never will." He sat and put his hat on and adjusted it. "You ready, cousin?" "Yeah." "There was an old waddy told me one time he never knowed a woman raised on indoor plumbing to ever turn out worth a damn." "She come up the hard way. Old man Johnson was never nothing but a cowboy, and you know what that pays. Mac met her at a church supper in Las Cruces when she was 17 years old, and that was all she wrote. He ain't going to be getting over it. Not now, not soon, not never." Not never. It was dark when they got back. Billy rolled up the window of the truck and sat looking toward the house. "You want to just leave the gear in the truck?" "Let's bring in the come-along. It might rain." He went on down the barn bay and at the last stall pounded the flat of his hand against the stall door. He looked back at Billy and grinned. "Egg it on," said Billy. "He'll put a foot through that son of a bitch." "What does he want with that owl-headed son of a bitch, anyway?" Billy shook his head. "Maybe it's like Mac says. Every man winds up with the horse that suits him." "What is that thing he's got on his head?" "It's called a cavesson halter." "What's wrong with a plain hackamore?" "You'd have to ask the cowboy." "That horse has been broke with a bit," Troy said. "Yeah." I guess he aims to break it and start over. Well, Billy said, I got a suspicion that whatever it is he aims to do, he'll most likely get it done. He ain't training it for the circus, is he? How many times did he get throwed? 4? How many times did he get back up on it? You know how many times. Is he supposed to be some sort of specialist in spoiled horses? Let's go, Billy said. He's liable to walk that son of a bitch all afternoon. They went on toward the house. Then he stopped and looked back at the corral. Finally, he said that it didn't make much difference if you liked horses or not if they didn't like you. He said the best trainers he ever knew, horses couldn't stay away from them. He said horses would follow Billy Sanchez to the outhouse and stand there and wait for him. Where's everybody at? He said. That horse fell backwards on him, like to broke his foot. Is he all right? I reckon. They carried him into the doctor, him cussing and carrying on. Orrin said he thought he was going to have to whip him, hobbling around after the damned horse, wanting to get up on it again. I guess this might whittle down his reputation as a pure deep heel or something, though, mightn't it? I don't know if it will or not. Joaquin says he stood in one stirrup and rode the son of a bitch down like a tree. He'd been asleep maybe an hour when the commotion and the dark of the barn bay woke him. He lay listening a minute. The horse hove past a foot from his face and went hammering down the bay and turned and stood. John Grady went limping past. What the hell are you doing? You are a goddamned idiot, ain't you? What in the hell is wrong with you? The horse began to run again. He'd no more than just got back inside the door frame before it exploded into the space of light from the single bulb in his cubicle. The horse went by as if the barn were afire and slammed up against the door at the end of the bay and turned and stood shrieking. John Grady came limping past into the dusty light again, trailing a loop of rope, and limped on out the other side. You can't even see the rope, the son of a bitch! A minute later, the lights came on at the house. The dust in the barn drifted like smoke. There you go, called Billy. The whole damn house is up. Put the damn horse up, said Orrin. John Grady looked back at him. You think I can't even catch him? Go on then, catch him. I hope the son of a bitch runs over you. One of you all catch him, said Orrin, and let's quit this damn nonsense. John Grady dropped the loop over the horse's neck and walked the horse down along the rope. Don't get on that horse, said Orrin. It's my horse. Go on, bud, said Billy. Put the damn horse up like the man asked you. him, and he looked at Orrin, and then he turned and led the horse back down the barn bay and put it up in the stall. When John Grady came limping out of the stall, he was carrying the saddle by the horn. "You're really something," said Billy. "You know that?" "It wasn't any of your business," he said. "Was it?" He paid his 2 pennies at the gate and pushed through the turnstile and went on across the bridge. He crossed the bridge into a sea of waiting vendors hustling cheap jewelry, leather goods, blankets. He stood at the end of the bar and ordered a whiskey and propped his foot on the rail and looked across the room at the whores. "¿Dónde están sus compañeros?" said the barman. He raised the glass of whiskey and turned it in his hand. "En el campo," he said. The whores came across the room one by one to solicit him, and one by one returned. When he left, he'd had 5 whiskeys, and he paid for them with $1 and put another $1 on top of it for the barman. He walked up Juarez Avenue through the hucksters and pimps. He saw boys selling stuffed armadillos. He walked up Tlaxcala and up Mariscal and entered another such place and sat at the bar. The whores came to tug at his arm. He said that he was waiting for someone. After a while he left and walked back to the bridge. With the rain falling in the streets again, and the vendors huddled in the doorways looking out at the rain without expression. There were no other customers. He described the girl to the barman, but the barman only shrugged and shook his head. "Eres muy joven." "Joven," said the oldest. She looked furtively about, but there was no one there to hear. "Ya no está," she said. He asked where she had gone, but they did not know. He asked if she would return, but they did not think so. "Gracias," he said. "Ándale," said the whores. At the corner, a sturdy cab driver in a blue suit of polished serge hailed him. He asked John Grady if he wanted to go see the girls, and he said that he did. "Do you know this girl?" "She's 16 years old. She's the epileptica." The driver turned in his seat. "Do you want to go to the White Lake?" "I don't have any more money." The driver shook his head. "You pay me next time, okay?" When he passed Billy's room, the light was on, and he stopped and pushed open the canvas and looked in. "You ever been to a place called the White Lake?" "Yes, I have, one time." "You better stay out of the White Lake, son," Billy called. "It ain't no place for a cowboy." When he got back to the house, it was dark, and by the time he'd unsaddled the horse and put it up and gone to the kitchen, Socorro had already cleared away and was washing the dishes. He got a cup of coffee and sat down, and she brought him his supper. And while he was eating, Mac came and stood in the hallway door and lit a cigar. "What time did Troy and Billy say they'd be back?" "I don't reckon they said." "How come you not to go with them?" I don't need to go everywhere they go. Switch on the barn light yonder. I can see all right. You can see better with the light on. Yes, sir. Well, it bothers the horses. Bothers the horses? Yes, sir. He put on his hat and pushed open the door. Mac watched him cross the yard. Bothers the horses, he said. Damn. When he got up in the morning and went down to Billy's room to wake him, Billy wasn't there. There's a man sending a 2-year filly out here that he aims to give to his wife. Is she broke? The wife or the horse? I'll lay 8 to 5 they ain't either one, said J.C., sight unseen. He wants to leave her here 2 weeks. They pulled into the yard in a pickup truck towing a new single trailer at about 8:30. John Grady walked out to meet them. The 2 men unlatching and taking down the gate on the trailer nodded at him, and the taller of the 2 looked briefly around the yard, and then they backed the horse down the ramp. "Where's Orrin at?" the tall man said. John Grady watched the filly. She had a nervous look to her, which was all right for a young mare offloaded onto strange terrain. "Walk her around." "What?" "Walk her around." "Is Orrin here?" "No, sir, he's not. I'm the trainer. Just walk her around a minute and let me watch her." "Walk her around some there, Lewis." He looked at John Grady. John Grady was watching the filly. "Are you the trainer, sure enough?" "Yes, sir." "What is it you're looking for?" John Grady studied the filly, and he looked at the man. "That horse is lame," he said. "Lame?" "Yes, sir." "Shit," the man said. "Did you hear that, Lewis?" "Yeah, I heard it. You want to just go on and shoot her?" "What makes you think that horse is lame?" "Well, sir, it's not really a matter of what I think. She's lame in the left foreleg." "Let me look at her." "Bring her over here, Lewis." "You reckon she can make it that far?" He brought the horse over, and John Grady walked up to her and leaned against her with his shoulder and lifted her foreleg between his knees and examined the hoof. He ran his thumb around the frog, and he examined the hoof wall. He leaned against the animal to feel her breathing, and he talked to her, and pulled his kerchief from his back pocket and wet it with spittle and began to clean the wall of the hoof. "Who put this on here?" he said. "Put what?" "This dressing." "I don't know," the man said. John Grady took out his pocket knife and opened it and ran the point of it down the side wall of the hoof. The man had come closer to watch him. He held up the knife blade. "See that?" he said. "She's got a sand crack in that hoof, and somebody has filled it in with wax and then put that hoof dressing over it." He looked at John Grady, and he looked at the filly again. "Can I leave her with you?" "No, sir." "Well, let me leave her here till Orrin gets back and me and him can talk about it." I can't do that." "Why not?" "I can't do it." The man took one hand out of his back pocket and adjusted his hat. "Well," he said. The man holding the horse toed the ground and looked away. "You're telling me to load her and get her off the place?" John Grady didn't answer. He didn't take his eyes off the man, either. Then he reached to his hip and took out his wallet and opened it and took out a $10 bill. "Here," he said, "put that in your pocket and don't tell nobody where you got it." "I don't believe I can do that." "Go on." "No, sir." "There wouldn't be no skin off your ass." John Grady didn't answer. "I didn't have nothing to do with doctoring it that way, if that's what you're thinking." The man stood looking at John Grady. He looked at the other man, and he looked out across the spread. "Let's go, Carl," the other man said. "Hell." They loaded the horse and raised the gate and shut the doors and latched them. John Grady stood watching them. "Hey, kid," he called. "Yes, sir." "You go to hell." "You hear me?" "Yes, sir, I hear you." Then they got in the truck and turned and drove out across the lot and down the drive. "Mr. Mac?" he called. "Come on in," he said. "What do you need that I ain't got?" "I wonder if I could draw some on next month's pay." Mac reached for his billfold. "How much did you need?" "Well, I'd like to get 100 if I could." Mac looked at him. "You can have it if you want," he said. "What did you aim to do next month?" "I'll make out." "And I guess you're big enough to handle your own affairs. It ain't none of my business, is it?" "Thank you," he said. "That's all right." "How did you know Wolfenbarger's filly had a bad hoof?" "It was her ear." "Her ear?" "Yes, sir. Every time that foot hit the ground, one ear would move a little." "Get your butt out of here," he said. "Thank you, sir." "Go on, it's your money." The cab driver would see him through the wrought iron gate in the high brick wall and up the walk to the doorway, as if the surrounding dark that formed the outskirts of the city were a danger. "Do you like for me to wait? I can wait." "No, it's all right." He handed her his hat, and she gestured toward the room, and he turned and went in, brushing down his hair with the flat of his hand. When he put his hand on the rail, the barman was already there, placing a napkin. "Good evening, sir," he said. "I'll have an old granddad and water back." "Yes, sir." Out in the salon, the whores lounged on sofas of red damask and gold brocade. They wore negligées and floor-length formal gowns, and sheath dresses of white satin or purple velvet that were split up the thigh. She was sitting by herself on a dark velvet couch with her gown arranged about her and her hands composed in her lap. She looked small and lost. She sat with her eyes closed, and he realized that she was listening to the music. His faint shadow under the lights of the great glass tiara above them may have brought her from her reveries. She looked up at him and smiled thinly with her painted child's mouth. "Hello," he said. "You care if I sit down?" She recomposed herself and smoothed her skirt to make room on the couch beside her. John Grady looked at the girl. She leaned forward and smoothed her skirt again. "¿Qué es su nombre?" "Magdalena. ¿Y usted?" He didn't answer. Magdalena. He told her that he had seen her at La Jaenada, but she only nodded and did not seem surprised. She spoke so softly he had to lean to catch her words. "No me recuerda?" he said. She shook her head. She asked him if he had a sweetheart at La Jaenada, but he said that he did not. She asked why he had not spoken to her at La Jaenada. He said that it was because he was with friends. She asked him why he had come to the White Lake alone. "Porque la andaba buscando." "También yo," she said. "Mande?" She turned and looked at him. "También yo." In the room, she turned and closed the door behind them. The prism-broken light from the chandelier that ran in a river over her naked shoulders when they passed beneath. She went to the bedside and lit 2 candles and then turned off the lamp. She reached to the back of her neck and undid the clasp of her gown and reached behind and pulled down the zipper. "Es casado?" she said. "No." He pulled on his boots and crossed to the bedside and sat and put his hand against her cheek and smoothed her hair. "¿Vas a regresar?" "Sí." "Di mi nombre." "Tu nombre es Juan." The salon was empty. It smelled of stale smoke and sweet ferment and the fading lilac rose and spice of the vanished whores. He took his bearings by the grey light to the east and set out toward the city. The old one-eyed criada was the first to reach her, pushing open the door to find her bowed in the bed and raging as if some incubus were upon her. The old woman carried her keys tied by a thong to a short length of broomstick and she wrapped the stick with a quick turn of the bedclothes and forced it between the girl's teeth. The girl arched herself stiffly, and the criada climbed up onto the bed and pinned her down and held her. The house whores were gathering in the doorway, and they began to push through into the room, all of them in face cream and hair papers and dressed in their varied nightwear. The girl's mouth was bloody, and some of the whores came forward and dipped their handkerchiefs in the blood as if to wipe it away, but they hid the handkerchiefs on their persons to take away with them, and the girl's mouth continued to bleed. The owner of the establishment appeared in the doorway in his shirt sleeves. "Eduardo! Eduardo!" they cried. He strode into the room, backhanding them away. He swept icons and candles to the floor and seized the old criada by one arm and flung her back. "¿Por qué estás esperando?" he hissed. "No la moleste," hissed the criada. "No la moleste." She lay, breathing quietly. There was a cloth lying on the bed, and he picked it up and held it for a moment, almost as if he might bend to wipe the blood from her mouth. But then he flung it away also, and turned and looked once more at the wreckage of the room, and went out and shut the door behind him. The air was cool. The smoke drifted in the light. When Tiburcio knocked, he did not even turn around. "El mismo, muchacho." "El mismo." When he entered the kitchen, Orrin was still at the table. "The man that owned that filly you wouldn't have on the property called out here trying to hire you." "I already got a job." "I think he just wanted you to ride out to Fabin's with him to look at a horse." "What did Mac say?" "Hell, call the man. You could do a little horse trading on the weekend, make yourself some money." "I guess I don't know how to work for but one man at a time." "You think a horse can understand what a man says?" "I think he can understand what you mean." "I guess my feeling about a horse is that he mostly worries about what he don't know. He likes to be able to see you. Barring that, he likes to be able to hear you. Maybe he thinks that if you're talking, you won't be doing something else he don't know about." "Do you think horses think?" "Sure, don't you?" "Mac always claimed a horse knows the difference between right and wrong." "Mac's right." Orrin smoked. "Well," he said, "that's always been a bit much for me to swallow." "I think if they didn't, you couldn't even train one." "Do you think you can tell what a horse is thinking?" "I think I can tell what he's fixing to do." "You don't think it's just getting him to do what you want?" "I think you can train a rooster to do what you want, but you won't have him." If a man really understood horses, he could just about train one by looking at it. There wouldn't be nothing to it. The best horses are the ones been around kids, or maybe even just a wild horse in off the range that's never even seen a man. He went the following week with no more money in his pocket than would buy a drink at the bar. watched her in the mirror. He had not meant to look directly at her, but he did. He could not even imagine her life. He got his hat and gave the woman the last of his change, and she smiled and thanked him, when one of the waiters stepped in front of him. "Un momento," he said. He stopped. "The girl," he said. "She say you no forget her." He repeated the words again in English, and then he turned and was gone. He was lying on his bunk, staring up at the rough-sawed boards of the ceiling of the bunk room when Billy came and stood in the doorway. He was slightly drunk. "What say, cowboy?" he said. "Hey, Billy." "Orrin tells me that squirrel-headed horse you think so much of is eating out of your hand." "That might be a bit of an exaggeration." "What do you tell him?" "Who?" "Horses." "I don't know. I think it's just what's in your heart." "You think a horse knows what's in your heart?" "Yeah, don't you?" "Have you got a girl you're seeing?" "Yeah," he said, trying to. "You intend to bring her around sometime, or we can get a look at her?" "Yeah, I'll bring her around. I'll tell you about it. It's kind of a mess. Right now I'm just a bit wore out." "I don't doubt it for a minute, cowboy. I'll see you in the morning." When he passed through the salon, it was all but empty. The blind pianist who sat in for the string trio at these late hours was at the bench, but he was not playing. His young daughter stood beside him. "¿Cómo estás?" said John Grady. "My young friend," he said, "how are you? You are well?" "Are you done for the night?" "No, we go for our supper." "Will you join us?" "No, thank you, sir. I need to get on." "And how is your suit advancing?" He wasn't sure what that meant. "The girl," he said. The old man bowed his head in affirmation. The girl had taken her father's hat from the piano and stood holding it. She took his hand, but he made no motion to leave. "I believe she's favorable." "Do you think she's a good person?" "Oh, my," said the blind man. "Oh, my. I think she is." "Her condition," the blind man said. "You know her condition." Little is known. There is a great deal of superstition. But this is my belief. My belief is that she is at best a visitor. At best. She does not belong here, among us. Yes, sir, I know she don't belong here. No, said the blind man. I do not mean in this house. I mean here, among us. He walked back through the streets. Along the sandy, unpaved streets, night vendors trundled their carts or drove their small burros before them. He walked on down to the river and squatted and watched the passing water, murky with clay. The cab, when it came, stopped at the turnoff and then backed and turned and came rocking and bumping down the rutted mud road and pulled up in the clearing. She got out on the far side and paid the driver and spoke briefly with him, and the driver nodded and she stepped away. He took her hand. Tenía miedo que no vendrías. She leaned against him, her black hair falling about her shoulders. Me amas, he said. Sí, te amo. She leaned and put her head on his shoulder, and he kissed her. ¿Y mi respuesta?" he said. She took his hand and kissed it, and held it against her heart. And she said that she was his, and that she would do whatever he asked her, if it take her life. She was from the state of Chiapas, and she had been sold at the age of 13 to settle a gambling debt. She had no family. In Puebla, she'd run away and gone to a convent for protection. The procurer himself appeared on the convent steps the following morning, and in the pure light of day paid money into the hand of the Mother Superior and took the girl away again. This man stripped her naked and beat her with a whip made from the inner tube of a truck tire. Then he held her in his arms and told her that he loved her. She ran away again and went to the police. Three officers took her to a room in the basement where there was a dirty mattress on the floor. When they were through with her, they sold her to the other policeman. He had bent forward, weeping, with his arms around her. "I must," she said. "No." "Te casas conmigo?" "La respuesta es sí. I marry you." As he was going up Juarez Avenue, a shine boy spoke to him. "Hey, cowboy," he said. "Hey, better let me shine those boots for you. You going to see your girl?" "Yeah. I hope you weren't going up there with these boots." "I guess it's a good thing you hollered at me. She might have run me off." "You work on a ranch?" "Yeah, small ranch. Estancia, you might say." "It's hard work, ain't it?" "Yeah, sometimes." "What if you could be something else?" "I wouldn't be nothing else." "Adios, vaquero." "Adios, bolero." When she entered the salon, he was standing at the bar. Within the shadows of the niche beyond the dais, Tiburcio stood, smoking, his fingers laced about the thin neolate ebony holder of his cigarette. He looked at the girl and he looked toward the bar. "Está peligroso," she whispered. "Cómo?" "Peligroso." She looked around the salon. "Tenía que verte," he said. She only looked in anguish toward the door where Tiburcio had been standing. She took hold of his wrists and begged him to leave. "Estás loco," she whispered. "Loco." "Debemos irnos," she said. She said that it was too dangerous, that now it was too dangerous. "Me matará," she whispered. "¿Quién?" She only shook her head. "¿Quién?" he said. "¿Quién te matará?" "Eduardo." "Eduardo." She nodded. "Sí," she said, "Eduardo." "I need to talk to you," said John Grady. They kicked back 2 chairs and sat at one of the tables and set their bottles down. The place was dim and musty. "I'll bet I know what this is about," said Billy. John Grady told him about the girl, about the White Lake, and about Eduardo, and he told him what the blind maestro had said. "You are shitting me, ain't you?" he said. "No, I guess I ain't." "What the hell's wrong with you? Have you been drinking paint thinner or something?" "No," he said. "Let me see if I got this straight. You want me to go to a whorehouse in Juarez, Mexico, buy this whore, cash money, and bring her back across the river to the ranch. Is that about the size of it? John Grady nodded. Shit, said Billy. Smile or something, will you? God damn! Tell me you ain't gone completely crazy. I ain't gone completely crazy. The hell you ain't? I'm in love with her, Billy. Billy slumped back in his chair. His arms hung uselessly by his side. I never should have took you down there, never in this world. He leaned and took his lighted cigarette from the tin ashtray where he'd put it and took a pull on it and blew the smoke across the table. Tell me this. What in the goddamn hell would you do with her if you did get her away from down there, which you ain't? Marry her? Well, that's it, he said. That's it. I'm having your ass committed. Will you help me? No and hell no. They're going to hook your head up to one of them machines and throw a big switch and fry your brains to where you won't be a menace to yourself no more. Look at me, son. You're not making no sense. What the hell kind of people do you think it is you're talking about? Do you really think you can go down there and dicker with some greaser pimp that buys and sells people outright like you was going down to the courthouse lawn to trade knives? Just let it go. It's all right. How did you ever get in such a mess? I don't know. They sat for a long time. He looked at John Grady and he looked out across the room. He pushed back his chair and stood and set the chair back carefully at its place at the table, and then he turned and walked out across the room and through the bar and out the door. When he woke, it was not from this dream, but from another. and the pathway from dream to dream was lost to him. He was alone in some bleak landscape where the wind blew without abatement, and where the presence of those who had gone before still lingered on in the darkness about. Their voices carried back to him, or perhaps the echo of those voices. He told the woman in Spanish that he intended to keep his hat, and he carried it with him up the 2 steps to the bar, and then he put it on again. "Senor," he said. "All Grandad and water back?" Billy took out his cigarettes and lighter and laid them on the bar. Several whores were draped about on the couches in the lounge. They looked like refugees from a costume ball. He reached for his cigarettes. He nodded to the barman. "Donde está Eduardo?" said Billy. "¿Quién?" He shook his head. "El Patron." When he looked in the back bar glass, the alcohete was standing at his left elbow like Lucifer. "Are you Eduardo?" "No. How may I help you?" "I wanted to see Eduardo." "What do you want to see him about?" "It's just something personal," Billy said. "Hell, I ain't going to hurt him." "Did you find some things you don't like?" "I got a deal he might be interested in." "Who is the dealer?" "Me. I'm the dealer." "I know who you are." "You know who I am?" "Yes." "You come with the mordida." "Pay for the drinks." "What?" "Pay for the drinks." He followed him out through the lounge, past the whores and their whores' finery, through the kaleidoscope of pieced light from the overhead chandelier, and past the empty bandstand to a door at the rear. A buzzer buzzed, and the alcohete opened the door. "How may I help you?" he said. Billy looked back at Tiburcio. He looked again at Eduardo. "I got a business proposition for you," Billy said. Eduardo held up the little cigar and studied it. He looked at Billy again. "Do you care if we talk alone?" "What I wanted," said Billy, "was to buy one of these girls." "Buy?" said Eduardo. "Yes, sir." "How do you mean, buy?" "I give you the money and take her out of here." He took a long, slow pull on the cigar. "Do you believe these girls are here against their will?" "I don't know what they are." "Of course you do. Otherwise, what would there be to buy?" "You're telling me that these girls are free to just walk out of here?" "That is a good question." "Well, what would be a good answer?" "I would say that they are free in their persons." "In their what?" "In their persons. They are free in their persons. Whether they are free here," he placed his forefinger alongside his temple, "well, who can say?" "If one of them wanted to leave, she could leave." "They are whores. Where would they go?" "Suppose one of them wanted to get married." Is it you who wishes to buy this girl? I'm here to make you an offer. Eduardo smoked. Cash money. This girl has an illness. Does your friend know that? I didn't say I had a friend. She has not told him that, has she? This girl will not leave here. What is wrong with your friend that he falls in love with whores? I don't know. Because she is whore to the bone. I know her. What do you want me to tell him? Your friend is in the grip of an irrational passion. Nothing you say to him will matter. He has in his head a certain story of how things will be. In this story, he will be happy. What is wrong with this story is that it is not a true story. Billy put his hat on. I thank you for your time. Anyway, some men get what they want. No man. Or perhaps only briefly so as to lose it. Do you believe that? I'll tell you what. Tell me. Let me sleep on it. Eduardo smiled. He said she didn't want to leave there. Well, that's a lie. Well, that may be, but he says she ain't leaving. Well, she is. You just think I'm crazy, don't you? Why don't you take a good look at yourself? She ain't American. She ain't a citizen. She don't speak English. She works in a whorehouse. No, hear me out. And there's a son of a bitch owns her outright that I guarantee you will kill you graveyard dead if you mess with him. Son, ain't there no girls on this side of the damn river? Not like her. Son, he said, I can understand a man wanting to get married. So I got the problem of getting her over here. You mean across the river? Yes, sir. You mean she's a Mexican? Yes, sir. Damn, son. How old is she? 16. It keeps getting worse, don't it? Does she speak English? No, sir. Not word one? No, sir. Son, he said, have you give this some thought? Yes, sir, I sure have. Where do you plan on living at? I thought if you didn't care, I'd see if I could fix up the old place at Bell Spring. Damn. It don't even have a roof anymore, does it? I could fix it up. If you got it in your head to go on, then go ahead. I'll do whatever I can for you. Is she pretty? Yes, sir, she sure is. You bring her in here. I want to see her. Yes, sir. The floor was of packed clay, beaten and oiled, and it was strewn with debris. Old clothes and food tins and curious small cones of mud. In the corner stood an iron bedstead with random empty beer cans screwed into the bare springs. There was a small two-eyed wood-burning stove against the far wall, with the rusted pipes fallen into a pile behind it. "This the honeymoon suite?" he said. "You're looking at it." "The only thing you ain't got here is a dead mule in the floor." John Grady had crossed to the back door and stood looking out. "I may be wrong about this," said Billy, "but it's my feeling that once I get used to lights and running water, it's kindly hard to wean 'em back off again. Got to start somewhere." "Is she going to cook on that?" "I hope she's a country girl." John Grady stood in the doorway looking out. "That's a pretty picture, ain't it?" He looked at the horses across the creek where they stood footed to their darkening shapes in the ford, with their heads raised, looking toward the house and the cottonwoods and the mountains and the red sweep of the evening sky beyond. "You think I'll outgrow whatever it is I got?" "I don't. I used to, but I don't no more." Billy walked out in the yard and took a long drag on his cigarette and stood looking at the horses. "There used to be a pipe from the spring to the house. You could run it again, I would reckon." "Yeah. I'd say the water's still good. There ain't nothing above here." "How well do you love this girl?" "I would die for her." "The Alcohete is in love with her." "Tiburcio?" "No, the Grand Alcohete. Eduardo." "Can the old woman be trusted?" "La Tuerta?" "Yes." "Oh, my." "The old woman is Tiburcio's mother." "You did not know?" "No." "Does she know that Eduardo's in love with her?" "Yes." "I'd give her up if I thought I could not protect her." "I think the difficulties might be greater than you imagine." "You wish for me to tell you some secret of the Grand Alcohete, betray to you some weakness. but the girl herself is the weakness. He is a cuchillero, a filero, as they say here. A man of a certain rigor. A serious man. I am serious myself. He is in love with her. Yes. But he would kill her. Yes. Let me tell you only this. Your love has no friends. You think that he does, but he does not. None. What do you think I should do? Pray to God. Pray to God. He worked all through the month of December at the cabin. What are you doing? Billy said. Painting window sash. You ain't gonna ask me in? How come you to have an extra brush? Just in case some fool showed up wanting to paint, I reckon. Tiburcio appeared from nowhere. He pushed the man aside and knelt in the girl's bed and unbuckled his belt and whipped it from about his waist and caught it and folded it and seized the girl's jaw and forced the leather between her teeth. I didn't do nothing, he said. I never even touched her. Speak to no one, Tiburcio said. Do you understand me? The alcahuete shut the door after him. A morbid voyeur, a mortician, an incubus of uncertain proclivity, or perhaps just a dark dandy happened in from off the neon streets who aped imperfectly with his pale and tapered hands those ministrations of the healing arts that he had seen or heard of, or as he imagined them to be. It's going to be cold up here in the wintertime, partner. Cold and lonely. It won't be lonely. "Can she ride a horse?" said Hector. "It gets cold up here," Hector said. "Yep." The wind outside and the cold in the room were like those winter nights on the North Texas plains when he was a child in his grandfather's house. When the storms blew down from the north. On just such nights and just such mornings in the year he'd gotten his first colt, he'd wrap himself in his blanket and go out and cross to the barn, leaning into the wind, the first drops of rain slapping at him hard as pebbles, until he reached the stall where the little horse stood waiting, and unlatched the door and sat in the straw with his arms around its neck, till it stopped trembling. He would be there all night, and he would be there in the morning when Arturo came to the barn to feed. All his early dreams were the same. Something was afraid, and he had come to comfort it. He dreamed it yet. And this, standing in the room in the black suit, tying the new black tie he wore to his grandfather's funeral on the cold and windy day of it. The last time he was to see her was in the same corner room on the second floor of the Dos Mundos. ¿Me quieres? Para siempre. ¿Y tú? He did not know if she was awake, but he told her the things about his life that he had not told her. He told her about working for the hacendado at Cuatro Ciénegas, and about the man's daughter and the last time he saw her, and about being in the prison in Saltillo, and about the scar on his face that he had promised to tell her about and never had. He told her about seeing his mother on stage at the Majestic Theater in San Antonio, Texas, and about the times that he and his father used to ride in the hills north of San Angelo, and the ghosts of the Comanches would pass all about him on their way to the other world again and again, for a thing once set in motion has no ending in this world until the last witness has passed. The shadows were long in the room before they left. He told her that the driver, Gutierrez, would pick her up at the café in La Calle de Noche Triste and take her to the other side. He told her that there was nothing to fear. He said that Ramon was their friend and that the papers were arranged and that no harm would come to her. He would have with him the documents necessary for her to cross. Todo está arreglado, he said. Él te recogerá a las 7 por la mañana. Tienes que estar ahí en punto. No le digas nada a nadie. No, nadie. Tengo miedo, she said. He held her. Don't be afraid. Te amo, she said. Y seré tu esposa. She rose and turned and held his hands. Debo irme, she said. He went to the window to watch for her, but she must have gone along the street beneath him because he could not see her. He sat a long time, and he thought about his life, and how little of it he could ever have foreseen, and he wondered, for all his will and all his intent, how much of it was his own doing. At the intersection, the cab stopped. "Señorita," he said, "señorita." She lay strapped to a steel table. The steel was cold against her back through the short white shift she wore. She looked at the light. She turned her head and looked at the room. After a while, a nurse came in through the grey metal door, and she turned her stained and dirty face toward her. The nurse loosed the straps and smoothed her hair back from her face and said she would return with something for her to drink. But when the door closed, she sat upright on the table and climbed down. She looked for some place where they might have put her clothes, but save for a second steel table against the far wall, the room was empty. She went down the corridor and tried the door. It opened onto a flight of concrete steps. She descended 3 flights and exited into the darkened street. She did not know where she was. At the corner, she asked a man for directions to El Centro, and he stared at her breasts and continued to do so even as he spoke. She set out along the broken sidewalk. She watched the paving for glass or stones. Someone was singing on the road a song from her own childhood. "¿A dónde va?" she called. "A mi casa." The woman stood quietly. The girl asked, "Do I know you?" but the woman said that she did not. She walked in a half-circle around her where she stood shivering with her arms crossed over her breasts, as if to find some favored inclination in the blue light of the desert stars by which she would stand revealed for who she truly was. "Eres del White Lake," she said. The girl nodded. "¿Y regresas?" "Sí." "¿Quieres ir conmigo?" "No puedo." "¿Por qué no?" She didn't know. The woman asked her again. She said that she could come with her and live in her house where she lived with her children. She said that she could not. She said that in 3 days' time the boy she loved would come to marry her. She thanked her for her kindness. The woman raised the girl's face in her hand and looked at her. She touched the girl's face and took away her hand and turned and went on along the dark of the road, out of the darkened barrio, and did not look back. Eduardo's car was gone. She crept shivering along the alley under the warehouse wall and tried the door, but it was locked. The portress with her painted face seemed unsurprised to see her standing there, clutching herself in the stenciled shift. She stepped back and held the door, and the girl entered and thanked her and went on through the salon. He seemed to have dressed with care for the occasion. She sat with her head bowed. He spoke in reasoned tones the words of a reasonable man. The more reasonably he spoke, the colder the wind in the hollow of her heart. At each juncture in her case he paused to give her space in which to speak. But she did not speak, and her silence only led inexorably to the next succeeding charge. When he was done, he stood watching her. He asked her what she had to say. She shook her head. "Nada," he said. "No." He turned and stood looking out the small barred window. He said that she had been spoiled in this house because of her youth. "Your lover does not know. You have not told him." John Grady listened to him going down the hall to his room. When he came back, he sat down and placed a gold ring on the table. "That's been in my dresser drawer for 3 years. It ain't doing nobody any good there, and it never will. We talked about everything, and we talked about that ring. She didn't want it put in the ground. I want you to take it." "Sir, I don't think I can do that." "Yes, you can. I've already thought of everything you could possibly say on the subject, so rather than go over it item by item, let's just save the aggravation and you put it in your pocket, and come Tuesday you put it on that girl's finger. She was a woman with an awful lot of common sense. I thought she just wanted me to keep that ring for a remembrance, but she said I'd know what to do with it when the time come, and of course she was right. She was right about everything. And there's no pride in it when I tell you that she set more store by that ring and what it meant than anything else she ever owned. And that includes some pretty damn fine horses. And now I'm going to bed." "Yes, sir. Good night." "You think you'll ever go back there?" "Where? Mexico?" "I don't know. I'd like to. I came out of there on the run, riding at night, afraid to make a fire. Those people would take you in, hide you out, lie for you. No one ever asked me what it was I'd done. You'd go to veterinary school if you had the money, I reckon, wouldn't you?" "You ever write to your mother?" "What's my mother got to do with anything?" "I just wonder if you even know what an outlaw you are." "Why am I an outlaw?" "I don't know. You just got an outlaw heart." "Because I said I could live in Mexico?" "It ain't just that. My daddy once told me that some of the most miserable people he ever knew were the ones that finally got what they'd always wanted. "Well," said John Grady, "I'm willing to risk it. I've damn sure tried it the other way." Quinquagesima Sunday, in the pre-dawn dark, she lit a candle and set the candle dish on the floor beside the bureau, where the light would not show beneath the doorway to the outer hall. She washed herself at the sink with soap and cloth, and she leaned and let her black hair fall before her, and passed the wet cloth the length of it 100 times, and brushed it as many more. She poured a frugal few drops of scent onto her palm, and pressed her palms together and scented her hair and the nape of her neck. She dressed with care in one of the 3 street dresses she owned, and stood regarding herself in the dimly lit mirror. The dress was navy blue with white bands at the collar and sleeves, and she turned in the mirror and reached over her shoulder and fastened the topmost buttons and turned again. She waited a long time. She had no watch. The girl clutched her santo and her purse and went down the alleyway. Somewhere out there in the world was Eduardo. Her feet were bleeding again in her shoes, and she could feel the wet blood and the coldness of it. The cafe held the only light along the Calle de Noche Triste. She pushed open the steamed glass door of the cafe and entered. The waiter came over. She ordered a cafecito. She was surprised to hear him ask where she was from. He said that he'd been told to ask by one of the men. She sat over the coffee a long time. "Lista," he said. ¿Dónde está Ramon? He said that Ramon could not come. She looked toward the front of the cafe. Está bien, said the driver. Vámonos. Debemos darnos prisa. She asked him if he knew John Grady, and he nodded and waved the toothpick. Sí, sí, he said. He said that he knew everyone. She asked him who it was who had paid him. Finally, he said that he had not been paid. He said that he was cousin to Ramon, and that Ramon had been paid $40. She said that she did not know. Mire, he said, su novio. Él tiene una cicatriz aquí. He passed his forefinger across his cheek to trace the path of the knife that had made the scar her lover carried from the fight 3 years ago in the comedor of the cárcel at Cuellar in the city of Saltillo. ¿Verdad? He said. Sí, she whispered. Es verdad. ¿Y tiene mi tarjeta verde? He took the green card from his pocket and placed it on the table. ¿Está satisfecha? He said. Sí, she whispered. Estoy satisfecha. And left money on the table to pay for the coffee and followed him out into the street. In the cold dawn, all that half-sordid world was coming to light again, and as she rode in silence in the rear of the cab through the waking streets, she clutched the ill-carved wooden relic and said a silent goodbye to everything she knew and to each thing she would not see again. And she said goodbye to 3 girls her age, stepping with care around the water standing in the street from the recent rains, who were on their way to Mass. She put her hands to her eyes, breathing deeply. In the darkness inside the cups of her palms, she saw herself on a cold white table in a cold white room. When she opened her eyes, the cab had turned off the road and was jostling over a bare dirt track, and the driver was watching her in the mirror. She asked the driver if they were to cross here to the other side, and he said yes. He said that she would be going to the other side now. What she saw coming toward her across the clearing in the earliest light of morning was the smiling Tiburcio. He had left the ranch around 5 and driven to the darkened front of the bar where he could see the dimly lit face of the clock within. It was very cold sitting in the truck. When he looked to the east, he could see the gray shape of the landscape. When he got to the cafe in the Calle de Noche Triste, the place was full, and The girl was hurrying back and forth with orders of eggs and baskets of tortillas. She didn't know anything. She'd only come to work an hour ago. The cook didn't know anything. He said the waiter's name was Felipe, but he wasn't here. He followed the trail of the cab driver through the various side street bars where he plied his trade. He went to the Jaenada and knocked at the door, but no one came. He sat a long time. There was another place to go, but he didn't want to go there either. A dwarf of a man in a white coat led him down a corridor. The girl to whom he'd sworn his love forever lay on the last table. She lay as the rush cutters had found her that morning in the shallows under the shore willows with the mist rising off the river. Her hair damp and matted, so black, hung with strands of dead brown weed. There was no blood, for it had all washed away. He reached and touched her cheek. Her good blue dress was twisted about on her body and her stockings were torn. "La conoce?" said the orderly. He stood in the door and called down the hallway. He said that if he knew this girl, he must make an identification. He said that there were papers to be filled out. Eduardo sat at his desk. "Where is he? His name is John Cole, and if you've harmed a hair on his head, you're a dead son of a bitch." The door was not locked. "I ain't studying your damn door." He'd taken his lighter from his pocket and was wafting the flame across the end of the cigar and rotating the cigar in his mouth slowly with his fingers. "Your friend is being sought by the police. The girl is dead. Her body was found in the river this morning." "Damn you to hell. You see what has come to pass? You couldn't just cut her loose, could you? You might wish to consider the question of your own implication in this matter. In spite of whatever views you may hold, everything that has come to pass has been the result of your friend's coveting of another man's property, and his willful determination to convert that property to his own use without regard for the consequences. But, of course, this does not make the consequences go away, does it? And now I find you before me, breathless and half-wild, having wrecked my place of business and maimed my help. Billy turned. He stood in the doorway and looked down the corridor. Damn you to hell. When he rode into the yard, it was raining lightly, and he could see them all at supper through the rain-bleared glass of the kitchen window. It was like seeing these people in some other time before he'd ever come to the ranch, or they were like people in some other house of whose lives and histories he knew nothing. Eduardo's car was parked in the alley under the dark of the warehouse wall. He crossed to where it stood and tried the door. Then he raised his boot and kicked in the door glass. And he reached in and laid the heel of his hand on the horn and blew it 3 times and stepped back. And Eduardo stepped out and stood back against the wall away from the light. John Grady moved out to the left and stood waiting. Change your mind. Go back. Choose life. I wanted you to know that I was still willing to forgive you. Perhaps you have not been in so many fights. It is like a first kiss. I have seen your kind before, many and many. You think I don't know America? I know America. How old do you think I am? Being farm boys, of course, the first place they think to look is in a whorehouse. They cannot seem to see that the most elementary fact concerning whores is that they are whores. And the boy's thigh was laid open in a deep gash, and the warm blood was running down his leg. Do you think she did not beg me to come to her? Should I tell you the things she wished me to do? You're a liar. The suitor speaks. He's becoming weaker. The sand is drinking his blood. What do you think, suitor? His shirt was sliced open at the front, and there was a red slash across his stomach. Eduardo's blade had severed the fascia of his stomach muscles, and he felt hot and sick, and his hand was sticky with blood, but he was afraid to turn loose holding himself. "Don't be afraid," said Eduardo. "It doesn't hurt so bad." "For a whore," the pimp said. "For a whore." He felt Eduardo's blade slip from his rib and cross his upper stomach and pass on. He made no effort to step or to parry. He brought his knife up underhand from the knee and slammed it home and staggered back. He heard the clack of the Mexican's teeth as his jaw clapped shut. Eduardo's knife dropped with a light splash into the small pool of standing water at his feet, and he turned away. Then he looked back, the way a man might look getting on a train. The handle of the hunting knife jutted from the underside of his jaw. He reached and touched it. His mouth was clenched in a grimace. His jaw was nailed to his upper skull, and he held the handle in both hands as if he would withdraw it, but he did not. He walked away and turned and leaned against the warehouse wall. Then he sat down. He drew his knees up to him and sat, breathing harshly through his teeth. John Grady was leaning against the wall on the opposite side of the alley, holding himself with both hands. A gray tube of gut pushed through his fingers. Then he let the knife fall in the sand and turned and wobbled slowly down the alleyway and out into the road. He tried to keep off the main streets. He opened his eyes. Billy was kneeling over him. "Oh, shit," he said. "You daggone fool." "Don't move me." "I got to. You couldn't get me across the border no way." "The hell I can't." "He killed her, Bud." "JC's bringing the truck. We'll run the goddamn gate if we have to." "Don't move me, Bud. I ain't going." "Just take it easy now. I ain't listening to that shit." "Billy, listen. It's all right. I know I ain't going to make it." "You should have told me. You didn't have no business coming down here by yourself." "She was so goddamned pretty, Bud." "Yes, she was." "She wanted to do the right thing. That's got to count for something, don't it?" "We got the little house looking good, didn't we?" "Yes, we did." "Bud? Bud?" His eyes were open. Billy called to him, as if he could not have gone far. "Bud?" "Oh, goddamn." "Bud?" "Ain't that pitiful? Ain't that the most goddamn pitiful thing? Bud? Oh, goddamn!" When he had him gathered in his arms, he rose and turned. He was crying, and the tears ran on his angry face, and he called out to the broken day against them all, and he called out to God to see what was before his eyes. Look at this, he called. Do you see? Do you see? She saw the man coming up the street, all dark with blood, bearing in his arms the dead body of his friend. She held up her hand. He passed. They could not take their eyes from him. The dead boy in his arms hung with his head back, and those partly opened eyes beheld nothing at all. The man and his burden passed on forever out of that nameless crossroads. And all continued on to their appointed places, which, as some believe, were chosen long ago, even to the beginning of the world. Epilogue. He left 3 days later. Socorro would not look at him. She set his plate before him, and he sat looking at it, and then rose and walked down the hallway, leaving it untouched on the table. It was still there when he went out through the kitchen again 10 minutes later for the last time, and she was still there at the stove. Bearing on her forehead in ash the thumbprint of the priest, placed there that morning to remind her of her mortality.